G'day listeners and welcome to another episode of the Scouting Australia podcast powered by Australian Property Scout Buyers Agency. I'm your host, Sammy Gordon, and today, guys, back by popular demand, we've got a fast Q&A with the lovely Morgan Holmes. How are you, Morgs? Welcome back.
Good. How are you?
Very well. Thank you very well. Got a big congratulations on the table with the new position, the sales manager of the BAs or the BA manager. How does that feel?
Very good.
Very good.
Excited to watch them all grow even more. So
100%. All the young guns coming through. It's good. It's good. I'm looking forward to it. But in the essence of being short and snappy today, which the people loved last time around, they preferred you over Big Jimmy. So you're back in the studio for the next Q&A. Let's kick us off. Let's rip into it.
Okay. All right. Question number one.
Let's go.
Why property as an asset class?
Okay, sweet. So for me, property over, say, something like shares or even businesses or anything like that, especially when I was very young, property for me was something very, very tangible that I could get my hands on, go and do renovations. And that's what excited me. When I first started looking at property, I'd been looking at cars at the same time. The thing that bit me about property and what I could do was actually be able to get my hands on, be able to force value on it. It was an asset that, you could actually, effectively get your hands on. And I think within Australia as well, it's almost like the great Australian dream to own your own home and own property as well. So for me, it was always a no-brainer. I've never had an interest in stocks or shares. I know a lot of people that do well out of them, but I've just never seen anyone get the same return as they can with property. And the longer that I've played the game, the more that I realized how much more powerful property can be over something like that as an asset class. People say you can leverage in stocks and shares as well, but I've never seen anyone be able to leverage to the point of what we can in property and how we can really utilize it as well. So, from the very outset, it was just bricks and mortar and being able to get my hands on it. And then moving forward, it's understanding the game at the level that we do now. And what you can do is you can just generate such a crazy return off the back of it.
What was your first property worth?
My first property was worth about 310, and I paid 275,000. So that was a little 2-bedroom unit down in Wollongong. Old shitter. It wasn't terrible, but I could see that I could force a bit of value to it. The carpets were gone, the paint was average. The kitchen and bathrooms were all a bit dated and everything. So I was able to get in there, do my renovations, do a little bit of work to it, spruce it back up, bring it back to life. And it was a cool little project to be able to work on that one.
How did you go from your first property to your second property?
So first property to second, it was kind of in that example, like I said, of it was worth 310 when I bought it. I think when I first got it actually valued, I valued it at it got valued at about $330,000. So it kind of took a couple of years from when I bought the first one to really learn what equity was and how to extract it and effectively strip that out to get into another deal and get into another property. But effectively what I did was when I saved up half of the deposit for the next deal, but then I also was able to release equity. So I can't remember what the exact valuation came in at when I pulled it out to buy the second one. But effectively, I was able to release equity or take a second mortgage on the home. So you got your primary mortgage, which was, let's say I paid $275, would have been about a $250,000 loan, and maybe get a bank val at $300, whatever it was roughly, and effectively get an equity release top up from that 250 to say 275, whatever it was, to pull that next chunk of equity, or 270 if I'd go say $300,000 val, 90% LVR, take it from the 250 to the 270, pull out that 20 grand and then use that as a deposit for the next one. So releasing equity and using that as a deposit for the next deal.
How do you find the right location?
So location for me always comes down to, there's multiple metrics that we really take into the equation when we look at selecting an area and finding the next place. You said location, right? Mm-hmm. So there's so many different factors that come into it, but the biggest thing we always are looking at are areas that effectively are tightening up from a stock level perspective, more demands coming into the area than obviously supply on market. That effectively means the market's moving into a very tight market from a stock perspective. That will create pressure and demand on a location. The real key to this is being able to understand this metric and actually get in there before the market turns. So if you can get in there before the market turns, before it tightens up too much from that perspective. So you've got to look at all these items, but then also you've got to look at, okay, well, what projects are potentially in an area? What's driving people into an area? Are they growing? Is the economy growing, and are people's wages growing, or are they declining? Are people staying there or coming there, or are they leaving? All these sorts of things will provide additional pressure on a marketplace and more people moving in than are moving out. More demand on an area. If you combine that with a supply shortage as well, tight vacancy rates, great yields, all these sorts of things, you start stacking all these things on top of each other. That's where you really get where you can really get a really strong result off it as well. So what we're really looking for is a stacked result with multiple different facets here, stacked result to be able to determine and pick a location from that perspective to go and buy into.
What was your biggest mistake on your property journey?
My biggest mistake on the property journey would be the time I took out of the journey doing developments. So time out of the game is probably the most cost-intensive thing that you can do in your journey. You always want to be accumulating when you can, and you're always wanting to be buying in new locations that are going to be able to go through growth cycles, effectively positioning yourself before markets go through big booms. When I look at the build that I did in 2012, it took me through to around about 2014. I bought the land in 2012, had it built, everything ready by 2014. That 18 months in the marketplace. If I knew what I was doing and I had the level of knowledge that I do now, I would have doubled down on buying properties in Sydney. I would have been buying them undervalued in Sydney, whilst that build was also in Sydney. If I'd leveraged up and actually acquired harder, I would have had a larger portfolio in Sydney before it took off and before it turned and took off, and that would have made me a lot more money from that perspective, and I could have leveraged harder again off the back of it as well. So, whilst the build was good and whilst I made good money off it, and I still own that property now, and it's more than tripled, it's almost quadrupled in a 12, 13 year window. Whilst that's great, what I could have done in that time frame of acquiring more deals, especially in the Sydney basin at the time, would have been a far greater result. And every time that I've done a build and it's taken me out of being able to do other things as well, it's a massive opportunity cost within it too. So it's almost always been slowing down to do developments, and I've always made great money off them. But when I actually look at the cost versus return of them, those decisions and slowing myself down through there was actually a very cost-intensive process.
How long did it take you to hit 10 properties? 10
properties. I think I hit 10 properties at 27. I think it would have been 27. I would have hit 10 properties. 27 or 28. So I bought my first one at the end of 2009, in November 2009. I was 19. I would have hit it somewhere either 2017, 2018, something like that. So we're around about an 8 to 9 year window. I'd probably say 8 to 8.5 year window, something like that, to hit the first 10. But I was on a pretty good trajectory and a pretty good journey when I kind of hit that, because I'd hit the wall at 7, taking a step back, and then I was on a serious send journey. I was buying about 4 to 6 properties a year at that point.
Would you do anything differently if you started investing today?
From how I started? Very differently. So if I go back to that example from before of the build and the development, whilst that was my second deal, if I knew what I know now and applied that as an actual strategy, I would have focused on leveraging harder, positioning myself further in the market, especially say somewhere like Sydney before it went, because it would have been the correct decision to go and leverage up in an area like that early. And I would have gone and got started very early in a market like that, leveraged hard, build the asset base, and effectively kept building it off the back of that as well. So compared to what I did, knowing what I do now, I would have done things very differently back then, and effectively applied the same strategy that I do now for clients, and even within my own portfolio for clients' portfolios. I would have applied that strategy and would have had an aggressive finance strategy as well. Really would have built my understanding around lending and being able to aggressively borrow money as much as possible, and then built my asset base as much as I could, taking those things into the equation, and effectively built the portfolio out then.
How do you avoid overpaying for a property?
The biggest way to understand how to avoid overpaying for a property is really understanding market value. So you have to be in a market and assess market value, learn how to assess market value on a deal before you buy it. What we typically always find is it takes a period of time to actually learn that and figure out what market value is before you go and buy properties. And you have to spend we see at least 3 to 6 months. We typically need to get into a marketplace for, watch and see what things sell for in different pockets of an area to really understand what market value is in an area. Without understanding what market value is in an area, it's almost impossible to actually determine how you're buying below market value, because if you're buying in the incorrect pocket of a suburb and you're assessing, one pocket against another, you may be in a blue chip pocket of a suburb that's worth, say, 500,000, and then you may be in a terrible pocket of another of the same suburb that should be only worth 400,000, but you may be buying something in that terrible pocket for 450. But then if you're rating against the properties in the good pocket, you may think you're buying 50 grand under, you may be paying 50 grand over. So it really comes down to really understanding the market value and the pockets and everything from a suburb and a street level and a pocket level. And once you understand everything from that perspective, that's when you can ascertain what true market value is and then make sure you're buying below that.
What's the biggest risk in property?
The biggest risk is being uneducated and making a decision. So if you're uneducated, you might chase things like super high yields or just something that's cheap. All these sorts of things, and they can lead you down a very bad path. So they could lead you into a mining town or lead you out into the middle of the sticks where, a property may do nothing for 10, 20 years or could come crashing back down if all you're chasing is something at surface level. So the biggest thing that I would push here is to become educated really around property and around what you're wanting to achieve in property. Get smart, get educated around that, and then really make a decision, in terms of what you're wanting to do and actually wanting to build in your portfolio. Make a decision off the back of that. Then you could, because it's going to allow you to build a strategy. And then once you build a strategy and a correct strategy, you're going to be able to figure out the correct deals to fit into the portfolio to align with that strategy. So don't go shooting from the hip and buying, something, just going out there and buying a property if you have no idea what you're doing. Property doesn't always go up. It 100% does not. If you look at almost all capital cities, almost all locations, they typically have a flatline period of 10 to 15 years post-boom. So just be very wary. If you're just going to go shoot from the hip and go buy in a location or in a city that may be very overvalued because it's had a few years of really good growth, or you go chase yields and you go buy in a mining town, that is probably the two riskiest things that you can do is not understanding what you actually need in your portfolio, buying something, shooting from the hip and making an incorrect purchase from that perspective.
When should I transition from residential to commercial? The
easiest way to make a decision around transition from residential into commercial really comes down to a cash flow perspective, right? And it's a servicing perspective a lot of the time too. Commercial is an extremely powerful asset class. Commercial property is an extremely powerful asset class when you are looking to build it into the portfolio from a cash flow perspective. The biggest mistake I see a lot of people make is they get into commercial too early. And they might have a certain amount in their super fund and they just go buy one property using all of that as a deposit rather than being strategic with what they've got in there. Or they bank one win off a property sale and they go park it all in a commercial asset, typically being pushed by someone who pushes commercial property, right? But it's typically the incorrect move. What you really need to assess is what do you need next in your portfolio, and what is this property or the next 1, 2, 3 properties, what are they going to produce for me in a portfolio? Now, if you go from one property or two properties and you consolidate because you've had some good wins and you sell down and then you just go buy one commercial property, what's the play after that? Because it's very hard to actually extract equity out of a commercial property after you've done it. So what's the play after that? Is it to, can you actually do anything else? Or should you be doubling down on residential and building that out again? Or are you able to do a mix? It's very unlikely that the answer of commercial is early in the portfolio or doing it instead of residential. It's typically more of a back end play or it's a hybrid play, like doing it in unison with residential. And what you really want to focus on is what do you actually need next in your portfolio? And that will answer the question in terms of when is commercial the correct play to come into it. And that's what we do when we help strategize with our clients, is obviously helping them make that decision as to when is the correct time to bring it in or leave it on the bench for another, say, 6, 12, 18 months.
Okay, there were the first 10 property questions. Now
Beautiful.
We're going to go to the first 10 wealth questions.
10 wealth questions. All right, hit me with them. Let's go.
How old were you when you made your first million?
When I made my first million, I would have been 24 or 25, obviously off equity from property. So I wouldn't have, I didn't make it before that, and I definitely didn't make it in income. From an income perspective, I was probably only making maybe 50, 60, 70,000 a year, something like that at the time. But it was the actual equity growth and the growth that I had in my portfolio, specifically from a lot of the properties that I had in Sydney. And then the accelerated renovation strategies that I was doing in both Adelaide and Brisbane, in my portfolio at the time as well. So it probably was 25 when I made my first million. And then obviously built it from there.
What's your biggest lesson from investing?
It's a great question. My biggest lesson from property and investing would be to make sure you're always buying. And I think that the biggest issues that I had and the slowest pieces that I had and everything else in my portfolio, the most money I left on the table was when I wasn't still actively investing. And when I was actively investing and buying hard and building hard, that's when I made the most money. The times where I didn't make the most, I might have had the same as the example before of like a development on the go, but developments are great. You get a nice chunk return, but that might be it. That might be all that you get. But then when you're able to leverage and stack the deck with multiple properties, financing, understanding the finance game, keep building it, keep building that equity base, that leverage return takes you to a completely different level. So it's probably the mix between understanding what you need in your portfolio next and then ensuring that if you've got the ability to acquire, you're continually acquiring. The biggest mistake that I see people make is sitting on the sidelines when they could actively be buying. So whether they're just waiting and testing the waters and dipping a toe in or whatever, like if you're working with someone and you trust that person, or if you get yourself educated and you go buy a property, like don't just go buy one, like double down or triple down or do whatever you can, because ultimately if you have one property at 500 grand and then it doubles in a 5-year window and goes to $1 million, mad, you just made $500,000. That's great. But like in reality, we're in the game to win at this thing, and time is not on your side in property. So if you can double or triple down on that, and you can go from 500 to $1 million, and then that $1 million doubles to $2 million or $1.5 million, that doubles to $3 million. The leverage return that we have access to that we can really scale from is really, really powerful. And I think something that a lot of people should focus on from that perspective, rather than looking at the down. Always be aware of the downside. But when you're investing, always be looking and shooting for the upside and what can we do? What can we go out there and actually achieve right now as well?
What motivates you to keep going?
It's a great question. In all honesty, I don't know what else I'd do if I wasn't still investing and running the business and helping people as well. I'm super passionate about helping people build wealth. I'm super passionate about still building mine and going through and I wouldn't know what else to do, because investing is what I've dedicated my life to for the last 15 years. And it's what I'm really good at. And I think like when there's something that you're really good at it and you're passionate about it and you're helping other people, do amazing things as well and showing them how to do it the right way, it makes it a very enjoyable thing. So I think because I still enjoy it and because I still consider myself very good at it, it's a no-brainer for me to keep going and to keep building it.
How do you structure your investments for long-term security?
Interesting question. A lot of what I like to focus on when I'm building the portfolio is to maximize leverage and also to make sure the portfolio is as bulletproof as possible. I've been building the thing for a very, very long time. And like over 15 years now, I've been building the portfolio, and to be at 100 plus properties, you don't ever want it to be a stack of, a deck of cards or a stack of cards, or a house of cards, that could fall over with a bit of wind or with one bad thing happening. So effectively, I've spent a lot of time, especially over the last decade, making sure that effectively the portfolio is as bulletproof as possible, and built it, in the correct way. So I've got a lot of fail safes if anything happens from that perspective. But yeah, effectively building the portfolio from that side, and even from like a debt and a cash flow perspective, because a lot of people they may look at the portfolio, but then they look at the debt level and they're like, oh, I'd never want to have that much debt. And it's like, yeah, but if you build the portfolio in the correct way, so you've got enough cash flow in the portfolio, then the debt really shouldn't be an issue or be something that you worry about. The biggest thing that you would worry about is if you have built a portfolio that's heavily negatively geared or heavily focused on one asset class and not the other. It's like, what could you be leaving on the table and what are you exposing yourself to? Like with interest rates down at 2 to 3%, and then they go to 6 to 7%. Like people who had a very heavily negatively geared portfolio or a very low cash flow portfolio were hyper exposed at that point. Whereas, people like myself who focused on cash flow as well as part of the strategy, we're not exposed at that point. Like obviously everyone's got a level of exposure if you carry a level of debt, but you also are very insulated because of how we built and structured the portfolio as well. So I think it's wise to speak to an accountant and to a tax planning accountant, property specific accountant and lawyer to make sure you're as covered and protected as you can be within your portfolio. But then also be speaking to your strategist and who you're building your portfolio with to ensure you're covered from a cash flow perspective as well. So you're not hyper exposed if anything changes or if a property goes vacant or if you can't work. All these sorts of things to make sure you're covered from that side.
I think a lot of security goes into also like monitoring the markets that you've bought in and knowing when to get out of them as well. Yeah,
for sure. Yeah, I mean, deleveraging and de-risking the portfolio is huge. It's a great point. Like so much of what I do, and what we do at APS is understanding when to exit markets as well. Deleveraging, de-risking, 100% is a great point, and something that we really focus on. And I mean, I'm going through a big sell down of a portion of my portfolio at the moment as well. Over 2024, I'll probably look to sell. 2025, I'll probably look to sell off 10 plus properties to do exactly that. Deleverage, de-risk the portfolio, bank the wins, clear the debt, move on.
What's the best money lesson you've ever earned?
That I've ever learned, best money lesson. It would probably be understanding the velocity of money. The velocity of money is what is your money doing for you at any one time. Is it producing for you? So velocity of money, is it moving for you? If it's moving, which direction? You obviously want it to be going up, not going down. You also don't want it to be stagnant. So for me, velocity of money is probably the biggest lesson I learned. I learned that probably around about 5 to 6 years ago. And effectively, it's almost like what's your equity doing for you? What's your cash flow doing for you? What are your savings doing for you? That velocity of money is so important because when you understand that, you understand the money that you're leaving on the table by not doing anything. But if you're going and putting that out into the marketplace, making sure you're continually doing something with your equity and with your capital, and as your portfolio gets bigger, you might leave less on the table, and you might you might hold a little bit more as a bigger buffer and a bigger security and hold a lower LVR on your portfolio. And I think it's wise to do that. But especially when you're early, you want to be leveraging hard. You want that velocity of money to be working for you. You got equity, you want to be stripping it. You got savings, you want to be investing it. You always want an adequate buffer, but you want to make sure you're really moving the needle as much as possible with debt and with growth, and making sure you're building it as aggressively as possible. And to me, almost like the riskiest thing that you can do, or it's not moving your money for you in a positive way. It's leaving it dead in a deal and not doing enough with it. So I think that velocity of money is huge. Understanding velocity of money and effectively investing off the back of it as well. Everyone's got different risk profiles also, but I think it's understanding your risk profile. What's going to help you sleep at night? Okay, sweet. Where's the benchmark for that? Are you a 70% LVR investor, 80%, 90%, 95%? Like what's your level of risk that you're going to be able to sleep with at night? And then go to the red line of that risk tolerance, which may only be, say, 80%, but like keep everything at 80%. Continually farm, harvest, push the portfolio, understand it from that side, and then keep moving the velocity of money within the portfolio.
What do most investors get wrong?
Their strategy piece. They're buying from the hip. Not getting educated enough within their portfolio, within their game plan, within their acquisition. They don't understand what they need to buy next. Probably the biggest thing is not understanding what to buy next. So understanding that piece in your portfolio, what do you need next in your portfolio? 99% of investors, I mean, you look at the stats, right? The stats are simple. 92% of investors get stuck at one or two properties, right? The reason they get stuck at one or two properties is because they don't understand what property they need in the portfolio to keep them moving forward. If they did, the stats wouldn't be 92% of people being stuck at one or two properties. So having that understanding and building the strategy around it, understanding what you need next in the portfolio is probably the biggest thing where I see people make the mistake on, and the biggest thing that I see the people that are successful in property actually going out there and putting into the marketplace and actioning.
What is one thing you do each day that keeps you performing optimally?
The biggest thing for me is training. So I train every single day. Every morning I go there, whether I hit the gym or I go for a run or whatever it is that I do. For me, it's always training. So it keeps me sharp mentally. Obviously keeps the body ticking over, the body feeling good. I find if I don't train, I'm always sluggish and I never perform to the max. Brain's always cloudy, always foggy. I never feel great. So for me, to make sure I perform optimally every single day, I have to train without fail every morning.
If you could put your success down to one thing, what would it be?
Probably, actually, the biggest thing is having grit, determination. So I think something we cover a lot on the Top 1% podcast is really that kind of that drive and the hunger and the passion. I've had that ever since I was quite young. I had it instilled in me as an athlete, as a youth, and I thankfully was able to take that through to business and to property investing as well. And I think like having that dogged mentality, having that grit, the perseverance, the passion, the will to push through when things get tough. Because it doesn't matter what you do in life. If you're going to try and achieve anything significant, you're always going to have roadblocks that come up and try and stop you. You're always going to have people try and stop you. You're always going to have issues and events and all the rest of the sort of thing that are going to try and stop you in your tracks of success. And I think it's having the grit, the determination, passion to push through all these sorts of things and not just quit and give up, but then also having solutions-based thinking to get yourself through it as well. But I think, the biggest attribute I would probably, put it down to would be that. Just living and breathing it, living my entire life with that exact, motto, mantra, way of acting.
What's the fastest way to accelerate wealth?
Understanding finance. So if you understand finance and really what that's all about, it's like a massive portion of what's in School of Property, understanding finance, and really how to scale the portfolio regardless of income. So understanding that piece combined with having a really clear strategy, and then obviously having that execution piece, that trifecta, super clear strategy, understanding finance, and then sourcing the correct deals in the portfolio. That is how you not only accelerate the journey, but absolutely win at it. Because you could accelerate the journey, but then hit a wall at 3 properties. But it's understanding how to accelerate it for a longevity piece and make sure you're building towards an entire portfolio rather than just, a deal or 3 deals or something like that. Because ultimately, you can't retire off doing 3 deals in your life. It's not possible, unless you've got really, really small goals. But most people we work with are chasing 250,000 plus per annum net passive in income. You can't do that off 3 deals. You need to build a sizable portfolio. So you need that trifecta of finance, strategy, finance understanding, strategy, and obviously the execution piece as well. And if you bring all those 3 things together, you will be able to win at the game of property and wealth creation.
What is your biggest goal?
My biggest goal is actually something that I'll say my biggest goal for probably the next 5 years rather than the big one that I've got cooking up. But my biggest goal for the next 5 years is getting 500 people on the stage in 2030. That to me it'll be a monster achievement of obviously what we're trying to do at Australian Property Scout. We've got another goal that we're sort of setting beyond that as well, but that's just like something that internally, we're obviously working towards. But for me, the big one on the horizon is getting 500 people on the stage by 2030. I think if we hit that, then our methodology is proven, and that will mean a lot to me and will allow me to set some really clear, solid goals moving forward off the back of that as well, for the next phase of what we try and who and what and how many people we try and retire off the back of that as well. But I think for me, it's almost like a legacy piece of like, I've done a certain amount in my own life. I don't need to work. I haven't needed to work for 5 years. I could have been very comfortable to finish working 5 years ago and not do anything. But this is what I'm super passionate about. And I think getting people on the stage and actually hitting that number or exceeding that number by 2030, which I think is extremely possible, I think that'll really solidify the fact of what we're out there trying to achieve and what we're out there trying to do, and solidifying that it was possible for one, and then what can we turn that into now? Like what can we actually change that to as well? So I'm super excited, obviously for 2025, let alone the next 5 years until we get to 2030 and hit the stage in 2030 as well. It's super exciting to obviously be chasing that down and going after that goal.
I think the hardest part will be Kelly finding a stage for 500 people.
We might need to go for a stadium. I reckon it might be a stadium fit out at that point, but I guess we'll see. We'll see how we go.
That wraps up all our questions.
Beautiful. Property 10, wealth 10, all done and dusted. Mm-hmm. Big Morgan Holmes, thank you for joining me on another Scouting Australia podcast.
No worries.
Listeners, I hope you enjoyed today's episode. That was a fast 20 of the Q&A of questions that you guys sent in between property and wealth creation as well. If you want to send in anything else as well, please make sure you send it in to us, guys. We're going to be knocking these things out regularly as well. We know you guys love them. The rapid fire, getting all the questions down for you as well. So send in any other questions that you want answered. Now, guys, if you took some great value out of today's episode, we please ask you to send this podcast on to anyone else you think would really enjoy today's episode and likewise take great value out of it as well. If you haven't left us a 5-star review yet, please jump on, leave us a 5-star review and hit that follow or subscribe button on your favorite listening platform if you're loving the podcast. And until next week, guys, that's Sammy Gordon here signing off and the lovely Miss Morgan Holmes on another Scouting Australia podcast.